Spent like 5 days by myself. And then I was like, alrighty then, I'm ready to be around people. I just was kind of over it. I was kind of over myself, kind of sick of myself. Anyways, so back to the values. What? It's not about me. It's not about me. I'm not a 5.
Welcome to Amy Liz Harrison's podcast, Eternally Amy, a mum of 8's journey from jail to joy. A Gen Xer who overcame her struggle with alcohol to become a best-selling author and mental health advocate. She shares stories of hope and offers ideas for others struggling with mental health challenges, spirituality, ADHD, or maybe just family, travel, and logistics. One thing is for sure, you'll leave with something to chew on. And now, here's your host, Amy Liz Harrison, with your mystery meat sandwich.
Greetings, compadres. For your mystery meat sandwich today, it's a quote by Charles Dickens from chapter 12 of Nicholas Nickleby. "What do you mean, Fib?" asked Miss Squeers, looking in her own little glass where, like most of us, she saw not herself, but the reflection of some pleasant image in her own brain. So this is a kind of random one, but the reason I picked it is because self can't see self, right? Like a lot of times. Sometimes we can, but I know for me that when I get caught up in different circumstances, different things that are happening, my view of myself is often inaccurate. And my character defects can't be turned into assets until I accurately know what I'm dealing with. So, I mean, look, usually for most people, it's at some level some kind of unresolved trauma. It's some kind of defense mechanism that, because we get these coping skills, right? So that we can protect ourselves and, at least for me, then feel safe. And that's what I do, right? I'll come up with something to choose a different way of looking at it, but it's not always accurate. Sometimes I'll look at myself and just go, oh yeah, I have it figured out. I've got the formula. That's what it is. And it's not always true and accurate. And so what I need sometimes is a trusted friend or mentor, sponsor to help me get an accurate perspective. So the opposite of aggression, they say, this is the last part that I'll say about it. The opposite of aggression is assertiveness, which honestly I have a rough time with. That line can be fine, very fine line, depending on how emotional a situation is for you. And it's something that has presented itself recently in my life that I hope to work on. That's your mystery meat sandwich for today. I hope that left you with some kind of morsel of something that you can chew on and think about.
And now, onto the Chaplain's Chat.
For your Chaplain's Chat today, 10 ways to spot an Enneagram Type 5, the Investigator. Okay, so Enneagram 5s are defined by their desire to conserve their energy and avoid being drained by engagement with the outside world. They focus on being knowledgeable and competent so that they can be as self-sufficient as possible. Sounds a lot like an introvert to me, which I think is fantastic. In fact, I have a lot of friends who we now say that we are the most outgoing introverts that we know. But we all have that same kind of no, I need to recharge on my own. Like I need to just be quiet and not say anything and not recharge by being around other people, right? Type 5 has this deepest fear that we've been talking about, the deepest fear of the types. 5's fear being overwhelmed by their own needs and the needs of others. To cope with this fear, they withdraw from relationships and maintain a minimalist lifestyle. Well, that don't sound like me. Focusing on the intellectual as an escape from the demands of the world. Okay, this is so interesting to me because I do know a couple of type 5s who that like totally rings true for is that they just want to be alone. They go on learning binges. They just want to devote themselves wholly and fully to something that they're currently interested in. Core motivations. 5s are motivated by a desire to be competent and possess a strong understanding of their environment. That's interesting. This motivation drives them to a nearly constant state of learning and knowledge accumulation. All right, number 2, key personality traits of the type 5. All right, they appear or can appear. Remember, these are kind of generalizations, so take them with a grain of salt. Appear lost in thought or absent-minded. They can be extremely difficult to crack their inner world because possibly maybe they're not sharing a lot about it too. That's okay. Maybe they have an in-depth knowledge on specific subjects of interest, which I think we sort of just covered, and that they give insightful, well-thought-out responses. 5s think extensively before speaking, and they have clear boundaries between family, friends, and work. Wonder what that is like. I bet that was been really challenging for people who are 5s, when they realize they're faced with the pandemic and all of a sudden it becomes one big melded together pot of soup, right? Working from home and being around family. And yeah, I bet it was challenging. Or 5s can be also withdrawn and extremely independent. Okay. Core values of an Enneagram 5. Well, as you can probably guess based on everything that we just read about 5s, freedom and autonomy are paramount to these type 5 investigators. So often they dream of working and researching alone in a secluded area for the rest of their lives. That may be a bit of a overstatement, but it is true. Like I think about, now I'm not saying that this person is a 5. I actually don't even know was a 5, but I think the Unabomber comes to mind because, that's one of those things, right? Is that people, who are these investigative types, they do want to just pull away and just take their time and digest all of these things that they're interested in. And I get that. I'm not going to lie. It's just that for me personally, I'll give you an example. When I had COVID 2 years ago in July of 2020, that was still at the period of time where we weren't sure if it was a death sentence. Basically, everybody thought that they were going to die if they had come in contact with me. So it was very not fun socially. But I was great. I spent like 5 days, because remember, this was a 2-week quarantine period. Spent like 5 days by myself. And then I was like, alrighty then, I'm ready to be around people. I just was kind of over it. I was kind of over myself, kind of sick of myself. Anyways, so back to the values. What? It's not about me. It's not about me. I'm not a 5. Okay. 5s tend to have little regard for social niceties and customs and are entranced by the potential of the unknown. During times of uncertainty and confusion, investigators hold a calm and steady mindset to analyze and figure out the best course of action in the grand scheme of things. So above all, investigators value independence, freedom, and understanding. So, how to recognize an Enneagram 5? Well, investigators are often stoic and detached, okay? So, again, And I guess maybe this is, I don't know if this is offensive that I said the Unabomber, so I apologize. But that kind of aloof, withdrawn, yet fascinated by the ever-expanding realm of unexplored ideas. And fives are energized by spending hours of time alone, as we just mentioned, tinkering with their personal projects and research. The path to mastery in a particular area is a journey each investigator readily embarks on. They may appear calm and collected on the surface, but when topics of interest come up in conversation, fives transform into a giddy and energetic version of themselves. This sudden gear shift may surprise those who are unaware of the investigator's hidden passions. This is so true. I have a friend whose husband is a five. And I mean, this guy is kind of like, let me just say, he doesn't add a lot to the party, right? No ill will meant towards him. There's nothing negative I'm trying to say. It's just he's pretty quiet. And he's just one of those guys. Okay, so then one time they were at our house and my son brought up a coding language. I want to say that's what it was. It's called Swift. I don't know. And this guy, I've never seen a person. It was as if he ripped off his costume and became somebody else in an instant. And this guy was like animated. He's talking about it. And it was almost funny because it was kind of like, okay, I see what gets a rise out of you. It was just interesting. So moving on to the health and not so healthy, not so healthy ways to spot an Enneagram 5. These are the kind of their tendencies. All right. Generalizations again. When they're healthy, fives become thought pioneers in their fields of interest and are generally regarded as integral to the intellectual advancement of society within that field. So they see large, complex issues with clarity and precision, and through dedication and genuine curiosity, they're able to foster change and advance societal movements. So basically, the impossible becomes possible for investigators who can bring forth new inventions, systems, way of thinking, and all of this with kind of that underlying quiet confidence. I mean, really, they sound pretty cool. They become subject matter experts who freely share their wisdom and discoveries with the public, and they have a talent for simplifying the complicated. Investigators have the potential to communicate previously mind-boggling topics with radical clarity. Man, that's a skill, I'll tell you what. Because I'm always like the Michael Scott, like, wait a minute, talk to me like I'm five kind of thing. Okay, when they're average, fives are offbeat, withdrawn, and emotionally closed off, as we referred to. They may have a select few esoteric interests, which they keep hidden from the public eye, and opt to present kind of a distant aura. They're well versed in topics of their interest and may be seen as a bookworm by peers. That's such a funny word, bookworm. I don't know. I just picture, is there anybody else out there who made the first grade caterpillar out of all the different colored circles? So every book that your class read, you add another circle and it's like on the bulletin board. And by the end of the year, you have this massive caterpillar, or I guess it's a worm. It's not a caterpillar. I don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, a very colorful worm. So back to fives, they may delve into their large collection of books, for example, or enjoy playing strategic board or card games for leisure. Side note on this, those are not yours truly's favorite games. I cannot stand those strategy games, particularly my husband. He's not a five. That is not his type, his first type. But he is that annoying person to play a board game with where he's totally all about winning and he's got a strategy and it's not fun to play with him. It's like, no, pass. And just what I want to do is play categories. That's what I want to do. When fives are unhealthy, they cut off their entire social world and may develop just this total tunnel vision. So they begin to have far off radical views. They can loosen their grip on reality, which is a little scary, right? Okay, I want to say the Unabomber again, but I don't want to offend anybody or make anybody think that I'm calling them him. So, sorry, not sorry, sorry, but the opposite, I don't know. With a lack of emotional awareness and foresight, investigators can find themselves in heated disputes with no clear answers. As a result, some friendships may be severed in the process, which would certainly baffle investigators because they just wouldn't understand why, right? They may rationalize that they're better off without the presence of people altogether and choose to escape the real world. And additionally, they can become addicted to far-off theories that few can wrap their actual heads around, and they can stubbornly cling to a sense of intellectual superiority. So this ultimately drives them even further away from people. So at their very worst, investigators can become just bitter people, and that's unfortunate. But you know what? We can't all be healthy all the time. That's life, right? Okay, growth tips for Enneagram Type 5s. Practice healthy hobbies that get you out of your head. Such a good thing for all of us to practice, right? Fives may find it difficult to relax and enjoy the present moment. So things like activities, physical movement, running, whatever, country line dancing, yoga, and other activities that help get you moving and in touch with your body can help you unwind in a healthy way. And realizing also that it's okay to ask for help. So fives generally don't do that, right? Because they want just complete autonomy and to be self-sufficient. But you likely have people in your life who would love to help you or just kind of get involved in your world at some level. So taking note of moments when you have too much on your plate, those may be opportunities where you could involve somebody else in it. And, being afraid to seek support when you need it is totally normal and natural. But I don't know, maybe trying to get outside that, bust out of the comfort zone. I don't know. I'm always saying that that's one of the hardest things for me personally about aging is that I really have this weird thing where I don't want to ask for help. And I think that I should be able to do it. And you know what? I've seen my grandparents, when they were alive, they did that all the time. Nobody wanted to ask for help. Oh, where'd you get that bruise, Grandma? Well, I fell off the ladder. The ladder? What were you doing on the ladder? Right? So those kinds of things. Back to the fives, ADHD, under control, back to the fives. Exploring their emotions. So fives use information and knowledge gathering as a way to avoid emotional discomfort. That totally makes sense, right? Escapism. Challenge yourself if you're a five to sit with your feelings and look into what you may be repressing. It's so easy to repress if you're a five, right? Sweep it under the carpet, right? And just focus on something else, especially something that you're interested in. Try writing out how you feel and listing what actions you can take, other than ignoring them, by the way, to deal with these emotions. Okay, and learn to accept outer world feedback, or at least consider some other world feedback, right? Like outside of your world is what I mean by outer world. So fives can get so deep down a rabbit hole that they close themselves off from any criticism, feedback, any kind of input from others. So you may assume feedback is useless if you know more about a topic than somebody else. I've totally been guilty of that. But it's important to stay open-minded and learn how to acknowledge and consider different perspectives. Yes, it is. Okay, celebrities. All right, do you identify if you're a 5 with any of these celebrities who are also 5s? I mean, not self-admitted, but this is just, again, generalization. All right, here we go. Albert Einstein, you know him? Do you know him? Have you played cards with him recently? Just kidding. Bill Gates. Agatha Christie, my mom's favorite author of all time. Stephen King, Jane Austen. Look at these authors, right? Diane Sawyer. Mark Zuckerberg. Another author, Emily Dickinson. Okay. Or everybody's favorite, Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Or Sherlock Holmes from Sherlock Holmes. So, 5s as children can spend a lot of time alone reading, making collections. They may have just a few special friends rather than a big old posse. And they're very bright and curious. They do well in school. They have independent minds, and they often question their parents and teachers. They can watch events from a detached point of view, just kind of gathering information. They assume a poker face in order to not look afraid or sensitive, kind of very difficult to read. They avoid interpersonal conflict, and they feel intruded upon and controlled or ignored, neglected when people try and push into their world, right? Okay, so that's, again, a paintbrush, a big giant paintbrush of how they can be as children. So as parents, type 5s are often kind, perceptive, and devoted, or sometimes they can be authoritarian and demanding. They may expect more intellectual achievement than is developmentally appropriate. They may be intolerant of their children expressing strong emotions. Isn't that interesting, right? Because their inner world is very protected. And I think that sometimes, at least for me as a parent, I'll think if whatever it is easy for me, I'll assume it's easy for one of my kids. And I'll forget that, hello, they're not all about me. They're not like me. That's not all about me and how I am. And they don't need to be like me, right? So my challenge is to, find the catalyst to be able to communicate and see what it is they're going through and see how they differ from me and see what they may need as a result of that. Number 10, type 5 in relationships. Okay, Enneagram type 5s are focused, as we know. Ooh, I like this word. They're mysterious, and they are typically quite romantic at the beginning of a relationship. Their flavor shows up when they have to find a partner who intrigues them, though they tend to be anxious about the whole outside world, right? And they can isolate. So they often will settle quite happily into marriage with somebody who they love and trust. When they do lose interest, however, it's usually because they met a friend with a shared niche, or they lost the fun and intrigue of the relationship as they figured their spouse out, or they felt overloaded. So even if they get tired or bored, it is super important for 5s to remember that no relationship will ever satisfy them perfectly, but it still means they need to show up and try. So 5s also need to realize that by going farther down the research hole, they miss out on the energy that can be gained from the virtue of openness and sharing, especially with a trusted partner. And they should try to understand that no amount of research will build back the consistent lack of confidence in their abilities that a 5 has deep down in those interpersonal communications or can have. And so really the whole challenge, right, of giving yourself wholly and fully to somebody can be super difficult for 5s, or it can be easy with a trusted partner. And it's just kind of one of those things. It's like ADHD, right? I'm always talking about how you can be super hyper focused if you want to be, but a lot of times we're known as being super distracted too. It's just hard to find that middle ground. So a 5 needs to learn to be content with enough versus all, everything. Okay. And that kind of falls into the whole organic idea of negotiations in marriage or with a partner or a spouse. So often relinquishing control and trusting a higher power can be a helpful tool for 5s, and it can allow them to remember their strengths or at least try to gain faith in the process of resting and actively sharing as normal people do in a normal relationship. And here's what's interesting about that is the whole idea of faith, right? I'm not a 5 and I don't know, I didn't find much about this, but I think it would be so interesting to know if the whole idea of faith and a higher power is super challenging for a 5. That it would be really hard to take that idea of walking from bridge to shore on, hey, I'm not ultimately in control, or here are the things that I am in control of. I think it would be really hard if you're kind of more of an engineered brain or scientific brain or really like to do research. And I think it would be difficult. All right, that's all. Okay. Emotionally, 5s can have trouble moving from their withdrawing, past focused feelings and their inhibited posture to a place of emotional processing, even with their spouse or others, even when others have tried to kind of share that with them. Like, hey, you know what? You could process this with me. You could open up, or maybe they are not responding super well to questioning, right? So they don't like to be incompetent, as far as I understand. They fear that. And so if they're not super sure why they feel the way they feel or how they feel about something, they might be kind of closed off and not want to process it out loud. So, the consequences of that are super, they're costly for a 5, right? Because you could be humiliated. You could be looked upon as not as smart as you really are, maybe have a deep sense of feeling overwhelmed or out of control. And that is or can be hard to recover from as a 5. So if you love a 5, remember that it takes them a few days to logically understand their own and your feelings, and they don't want and likely can't execute the same level of socializing that you can. Remember also, however, that their love delves deep and you can find them thinking about you in small, thoughtful acts that take much of their time and energy. So partners of 5s usually pick the 5 initially for their focus on them, their laid-back attitude, and their wit and stability. So it's helpful when they don't demand things the 5 doesn't have as their gifts, such as being, as I mentioned, the life of the party, right? Adding a lot to the party. Or they're not super great at being spontaneous, for example. And it's also important to build up a 5 and encourage them to make it through the often super grueling days of processing, with people that they may have to do, and encouraging them to take care of themselves and try to pour into, make deposits in their self-care and pour into themselves. especially with, as I mentioned, the physical activity is also encouraged. So even if they have trauma, illnesses from the past, whatever it is, right? To remind your 5 to take it one day at a time, but also to honor their story and their journey when they do finally open up. Because I think that that is really a difficult concept for all of us initially, is to not, especially those of us who have grown up in the evangelical church, you want this linear story, right? I used to be this way and I was downtrodden, and it was that I was this sinner, and then I found God, and then the sun came out and everything is perfect and it's rainbows and bunnies and orgasms. And that's just not real, not reality. And the whole idea of a cyclical journey is sometimes just a tough concept, and tougher for some more than others, and definitely tougher for 5s from my understanding. So my dad is a 5, and I can say this is so accurate for how he is and how he processes / doesn't process. And I used to be so just emotionally ripped up thinking, oh my gosh, my dad never expresses love. It's something that I did or didn't do. He doesn't like who I am as a person. I had all these false narratives in my head about my own dad. And the truth of the matter was that was all BS. Like, none of that was true. The real story is my dad had some super traumatic events happen to him in the past. And personality or not, that affects you, right? Like, that's just a point in time that sometimes is a marker, and you're different after some of those things. And so I didn't know him before those things. And I now know him, for these almost 46 years, as this very withdrawn and aloof person who doesn't really open up emotionally. But I get it. I don't get it in the sense like I haven't been in his shoes, but I have such a better understanding for him now of who he is. And I can even look back now and I can see just his fingerprints all over my life in ways that he showed me love. And some of this was, he had different love languages than I did. And he's very much kind of an acts of service guy. So I'd come home from college, and he would change the oil in my car. He would and still does to this day, assemble something for me, like maybe some bookshelf that I ordered off, Today it would be Amazon. Back then it would be like picked up at IKEA, right? But ways that now it is my job to see my dad for who he is and recognize, hey, that's him showing love to you, right? And as a kid, a teenager specifically, I just couldn't see that. And that's okay. And I am thankful that I had that opportunity and time with him where, we are both still alive, and I lived and was exposed to different ideas and therapy and teachings. And, you sort of just live to give people grace. And it's like, oh, well, I was wrong all along, it's because of this, that, and the other thing. And it just gives you this real sense of empathy and compassion for somebody else and their struggles and their journey, and how I actually felt pretty guilty because I felt like I was kind of hard on him, at least in my own mind, because I had these expectations of who he could and should be. P.S. Guess where those expectations came from, right? Comparing my situation to somebody else's, right? And so once I was comparing my insides to other people's outsides, right? And I was going, oh, I feel neglected, or my dad doesn't care, or whatever, but, Debbie's dad totally cares because, he's Mr., down at the school track meet leading the cheers and all this stuff. Like, my dad was never going to do that. So learning to have that love and grace for people, that's like kind of one of the biggest things that I myself want to work on. And for the bailout bag today, I would love to just say that I am all about the Ram Dass. We're all just walking each other home. And I'm not sure, I know I say that one quite a bit. I'm not sure why I'm feeling like saying that today at this moment, but it is so true, right? That like when you break it all down, we're all just still kids. We're those 14-year-olds who just feel insecure, and we just want to know that we're okay and accepted in all of our weirdness. And we are okay. It is okay. It's okay to not be okay, right? So on that note, be kind, rewind. Thank you for your time, and take what you like and leave the rest behind.
Thank you so much for listening to Eternally Amy. Amy Liz Harrison is a best-selling author, speaker, 12-step coach, meditation teacher, and recovery advocate. To find out more, please visit amylizharrison.com. Keep up with Amy on all platforms by following @AmyLizHarrison. Please subscribe and review this podcast. It means so much to us if you do.